Hey guys, Ed over here at FICMRepair. Repair. So this comment came in response to a video I did the other day on dual alternators. And it's like, hey, I love the 240 amp. I just got to buy the cables now. Oh my goodness, you're running the 240 amp without cabling? Please don't do that. Oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. At least either fabricate your own version of the equivalent of our basic wiring kit, or, buy our basic wiring kit, or better yet, our deluxe wiring kit. But something. You see, what the issue is, it's that size matters, right? So American wire gauge, and please don't misunderstand, I bleed red, white, and blue, right? But American wire gauge, this is just us being difficult. Circular mills, KCMIL, is such a better metric. So if you take a look at this, what you'll see is that you just do a search, Google search on KCMIL space AWG, hit enter, and you'll get taken, one of the links you'll see is to this chart. And it'll show you that an 8 gauge wire, highlighted there at the top, is 16,507 circular mils. And so you say, okay, that's nice. But you go down a couple of bits and you see that the 1/0 cable is 105,518 circular mils. And so, like, holy crap, man. You mean to tell me that a 1/0 wire is that many times more than an 8 gauge wire? That's exactly what I mean to say. Or you can take a look at the interconnect between the batteries, which you know is a 2 gauge cable, and you see that 2 gauge cable is 66,361 circular mils, and you compare that against our 4/0 cable, which is 211,566 circular mils, and you're like, this is massive freaking wire. And you're like, yeah. And you can see that, okay, fine, a 1/0 cable is 105,000 circular mils, but a 4/0 cable is 211,000. So really what we're saying is that a 4/0 is the equivalent to two 1/0s. Yes, all of that is true. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to lose in conversation the whole bit about ampacity. What is the electrical amp carrying capacity of wire? And so if you start looking at voltage drop calculators and all this kind of stuff, what you'll start seeing is that the amount of resistance that you're putting into this is significant, and asking your alternator to push against something that hard with that much resistance against it is not a conversation that ends well for you. So really, you want a larger gauge wire. And like if you were to pick up our cable kits, it's straight up copper. It's none of this copper clad aluminum garbage. It's a gajillion stranded, because electrons travel over the perimeter of the wire. They don't travel through the wire actually. So the more strands, the merrier. And all of this, you end up with a very flexible, very, very, very useful solution. But I share all this to say, there's a lot more than meets the eye. And if you want to build your own cables, God bless you, that's fine, right? Just please do not solder the ends. Oh my goodness, no. Please use at least a 16-ton hydraulic crimper on it. Please go ahead and use a double wall adhesive back heat shrink tubing on the connection from the crimp to the insulated wire. And then ideally what you would do, because if you short like a 4/0 cable to ground, it'll ruin your whole day. Take some sort of nylon braiding over the top of the cable for some extra resistance to having a problem. And or if you know that the wire is going to traverse something that's kind of rough, like say for example, like with our interconnect kit, or the part of our deluxe wiring kit that interconnects the batteries far better to each other, we actually include extra sections of heat shrink over that little bit. And so as a result, what happens is, it just provides that extra little bit of resistance so that the bottom side of your radiator brackets don't over time vibrate and chew into that wire and cause you to have all kind of problems. So I hope this helps somebody, but if you're running larger than 185 amp peak alternator, and recognize peak alternators, like I know, for example, like our 240 amp alternator, like what this gentleman's referencing here, and I don't know if it's ours or somebody else's that he got, because I've never heard of one of ours wine actually. But at any rate, our 240 amp, it does 190 at cold idle. Okay, fine. Well, like some of the other alternator options that are out there, there's like a 220 out there that I'm not a fan of, but it does 110 at cold idle. So 220 does 110. So the 220 is over the ampacity, the electrical carrying ability of the 8 gauge wire that Ford gave us, all the way at the top up here. And so just recognize that. But the 110 is the problem. So in other words, you could have gotten our like 185 amp alternator that does 130 at cold idle, and A, you wouldn't have needed cabling, and B, you'd have more amps where it matters at cold idle, if that makes sense. But if you live in a pseudo cold or cold climate, then probably you want something bigger. So you'd like the 240 makes a whole lot of sense because it definitely covers more of that 230 amp draw that you've got at cold idle right after the truck starts with the glow plug still yet running. So, and if you want more than that, certainly we have a 320 amp and even a 370 and even a 400 amp option, all of which do more and more and more at idle. But the more of that 230 amp draw that you can cover, the less the depth of discharge on the batteries, and the faster you're going to get them to be recharged, and just life is better for you. But what you don't want to do, and this is the reason why I felt so obligated to shoot this video, is you don't want to run anything bigger than like a 185 amp peak alternator with the stock wiring for fear of having a very serious problem. So don't let that happen to you. Hop on FICMRepair.com, get what you need, and move on. And ideally, you'd couple this with this product here or its equivalent. This is an electrically conductive grease. It's great for lug ends or the lug hits the frame, or on battery connections or something like that. It's exactly the antithesis, the opposite of dielectric grease. That's an insulator. This is actually a conductor. So this is what you want. All right, FICMRepair.com. We're all in this together. I appreciate you guys. Take care.